One thing I think Karen and Kim started to talk about, we really need to make sure that we get our parents in here. We got to help our parents with this process too. We know that our kids learn to communicate at home, and that's just a fact. From the time they're born, they're with you. They learn to communicate around the dinner table. They learn to communicate in that high chair, flinging those Cheerios, right? We know that's where that happens. And we don't get them until they're 3 to 5 years old usually, right? So we want to make sure that you all are comfortable with what you're doing in the home, and have the materials that you need and the information that you need so that you can support that at home. So that's really what we're about today. We're going to take a little bit of time talking about the Classroom Communication Project. That's the name of our project, and what that entails, and what we're going to kind of back up a little bit and talk about what is augmentative communication. What does it look like? It has all kinds of different forms. Who's it for? What are the students that benefit from augmentative communication? And then we're going to shift gears and talk about how do we teach this, okay? All right, let me grab a little changer here. Do it right. Welcome. I'm a technology specialist, but I didn't mention that. Oh, you know what you have to do first? You have to turn it on, and then it will work, right? Okay. All right, so let's talk about augmentative communication. Augmentative and alternative communication is a big mouthful, but essentially it means supports materials, equipment that gives people a way to communicate whose speech is not meeting their needs for whatever reason. We're going to take a look at those people. When people first learn about augmentative communication, or AAC, they usually think first about this: high-tech communication devices, right? So that's our vendors that are here today. Ron Steinberg and Christine Kramlich and Courtney Maholtz, they're here with the companies that make these pieces of equipment. So that's a piece of the puzzle. These are fantastic devices that have thousands and thousands and thousands of words in them. So all the vocabulary that you could possibly want is right here in these devices. But that's only a piece of the puzzle. It's not the only answer. A lot of times people think, oh, I've got to have one of those devices, and then all of a sudden my child is going to be able to communicate. Well, that's not how it works. Unfortunately, it'd be fantastic if it was, but that's not how it works. There's a lot more that goes into it. We also use light tech. We call it light tech when it's not a voice output electronic device with multiple pages on it. All right? So it can look in many different ways. It can be communication books that have symbols in them. It can be, this is for a young man who uses eye gaze, so he can't touch with his hands very well. So he uses a little flip book that has symbols on it, and he looks at the symbols, and the teacher and his parents know what he's trying to say. This young man also has a high-tech device too, but when it breaks, and it will, he has a backup system, so that's what this is for. The Go Talk is something that you may have seen in your classrooms. It's very prevalent out of the school districts. It's less expensive, so it's easier for us to put that out into the classrooms. But basically how this works is you just slide a little paper in that has symbols on it, and then you can press those symbols and they speak out loud. So the teacher or the adult programs it, and then it speaks for you. We have things like little single message switches. So you push the button and it might say, I want some cookies. I'd like a snack. So very simple ones. We have just boards that are contact papered onto folders, and that works for students too. And finally, this is something that that we created in one of my other school districts. That's an AAC flip book. It's a comprehensive communication system. It has a lot of language in it. It's got over 700 words in this little system. And you'll see examples of this flip book over on the table. This one we printed in poster paper, so it's this big in one of my classrooms. So I'm really excited about that thing. So augmentative communication look very, very different. Sign language is also augmentative communication. It's a way to communicate other than speech or in addition to speech. So it's also AAC. So people talk about AAC. I think sometimes what happens is they learn one device. You know, for years, Dynabox. If people call me, they say, I want one of them Dynaboxes. You know, thinking about the equipment that Ron has. That's AAC. But that is a piece of it, but there's so much more to it than just one device, right? There's lots of things. Okay, so thinking about who is AAC for? Well, I think it's obviously people really understand that augmentative communication is for students who can't speak because of a motor problem, right? So if they have cerebral palsy and they can't control their mouths, right? They can't control their breathing in their mouths enough to form those words. Those people obviously need augmentative communication, but they're not the only people who need augmentative communication. We have people who need augmentative communication because they have their language skills are decreased. They haven't learned enough words to be able to communicate, right? So we give them supports, visual language to help them have all the words that they need. We have students who have, in our district, we have students who have autism, we have students who have cerebral palsy, we have students who have muscle weakness, who don't communicate because of that reason. So it really meets the needs for lots of different individuals. Essentially, it is for anyone whose communication doesn't meet their needs, right? Their speech doesn't meet their needs to communicate, okay? Anyone. It can be used for adults too, right? If you have, I don't know if you've had family members who might have had a stroke and have lose the ability to speak, augmentative communication is for them too. So anyone whose speech isn't working for them to meet all of their needs. Now, the reason that we call it augmentative and alternative communication, that big old mouthful, is that we use it for different reasons for different people. Some people use augmentative or alternative communication because they cannot speak. They have no words at all. So this device or book or board is how they speak. They communicate completely. So this is a little friend of mine multiple years ago, and he does not speak. He's not speaking. So he uses his device to say everything he wants to say. Let's see if I can get this video. Oh, no, hold on, let me back up. Back up. Let's see that video.
I want to watch Dora.
You want to watch Dora? Okay, let's watch some Dora. One more video, and then we're going to play with some toys. She asked very nicely for a cookie jar when you first walked in.
Any of you sick of Dora? There's a couple characters that I've had enough of. Dora and Barney are at the top of my list, right? But anyway, the kids love them. So when we work with our communication systems, it's really important that the individual is able to say what they want to say. It's not just about communicating what we tell them to say. It's really a way for them to communicate to us what's inside, right? And if you really want to teach people to help people learn to communicate, the way that we do that is we figure out what is it that they want to say, and then we give them a way to say it, right? So we're not telling them what to say. Today we're going to learn the days of the week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Okay, they have to learn those things academically, but when we read it, what we really want to do is we want them to be able to say, I want cookies, I'm excited, I don't like it, I need a break, right? We need those kind of messages, right? Okay, so that's a child who's non-speaking. But augmentative communication also really, really can help people who are speaking, but their speech doesn't meet their needs for their total communication. So maybe they are 10 years old and they have 30 words that they can use. Well, that's not enough, is it? If you think about what their peers are saying, we want to give them the ability to communicate all the things that their peers can communicate too. And I don't care if they have an intellectual disability label or autism. I still want to give them the supports they need to be able to communicate just like their peers. And that's where augmentative communication comes into play. This is a young man that I worked with for many, many years. I met him when he was 3 years old. His name is George. He is delightful. When I first met him, he was non-speaking, and we got him a communication device. And he worked in therapy with this device. He worked at home with this device. And over the years, his speech started coming out. After a couple of years, he was using echolalia. You know how our students with autism will repeat everything that you say? That's echolalia. And then he got really good at that echolalia, and he started using it even not in direct imitation of us, but he would repeat things that he'd heard in the past appropriately, right? So he could take those phrases and he could apply them to situations. Do any of you have children who do that? Yeah, okay. So it's very, very common. But the problem for George was he still didn't have enough words. He couldn't put words together to make sentences creatively to communicate. And over the years, he used his device to help him learn the words. So he would push the buttons, listen to them, and then repeat the device. So it really helped him learn language that way. And then when he was struggling coming up with words, he could go into his device or his book, and he could find the page. If he wanted to talk about what restaurant he wanted to go to, he could go find the page with all the restaurants on it. So he didn't have to come up with those in his head. He could go find a page that had it all on there, and then he could communicate effectively. Now, at this point, the last time I worked with George, he was 13 years old. And at that point, he'd had 2 different communication devices, and his speech had improved and improved and improved. And at 13 years old, his speech was better than his use of the device. So he stopped coming to me. He graduated. So that was like a big party, very exciting. And now he just uses his NovaChat device to play Candy Crush. So that's cool. That's a win, right? Okay, so let's look at George. I want you to see how, he was about 10 years old when we took this video, and this is how he used his device to interact with
Did you eat at home or did you eat in a restaurant? You could come in that part where you ate. You went to places, yeah, exactly. So you could have eaten at home, or you could have eaten outside, or you could have eaten at a restaurant. Where did you eat? Oh, did you eat out today? Oh my gosh, you're so lucky. Where did you eat? Is it one of these or something different? Was it Chick-fil-A or McDonald's?
McDonald's.
You ate at McDonald's?
Yeah.
Oh, you know what? That makes me have an idea about what you ate. Because I know what food they have at McDonald's. They have all kinds of food at McDonald's, but I have an idea what kind of food they have at McDonald's. Their food page. At McDonald's, I go to my meals. They have all this stuff. They have hamburgers and nuggets and cheeseburgers and French fries.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And
Yeah.
and drink.
And drink? What kind of drink do you get at McDonald's?
Sprite.
Oh, you get that one. You get a Sprite. Oh my goodness. So you get a Sprite, and what did you have to eat? What do you like to eat at McDonald's? They have salad and cheeseburger. Hamburger, nuggets, fries. What do you eat?
French fries.
Oh, me too. Me too.
Because you know what you eat is French fries and Sprite. And we don't do the rest of that stuff, right? Isn't he adorable? I love this kid so much. It's when I go see these videos I've had for years, I miss my kids. He's a big old grown person now. I don't know how old he is at this point. Maybe 16, something like that, 17. Anyway, but you can see he talks, right? He's got words, but the device helped him get to more specific words, right? He was able to, you saw, he sometimes has trouble finding those words. They're in there, but he can't always produce them. A lot of times there's students with autism, they have the words, but they can't consistently produce them. They can't consistently find them in their little brains, right? That is something that happens with students with autism. We hear things like, oh, so he talks when he wants to. He's lazy. He talks when he wants to. Have you ever heard that? Okay, that's not accurate. People that have autism that don't talk, that don't always talk, that inconsistently talk, it's because they can't always access those words, especially if they're under stress. If there's something that's really stressing them, they have trouble getting those words out, right? Unless they're really under stress, and then sometimes all those words blurt out of their little mouths, right? Okay, so that's another reason that we would use augmentative communication, to make sure that they have access to communication all the time, right? I interacted with a lady who is she was a teaching assistant at a university, and I met her online. I was looking for people to interview who were AUGCOM users, augmentative communication users, right? And she responded to me and she said, I'm a part-time augmentative communication user. And I was very curious. I said, well, what does that mean? And she said, well, I actually am a teaching assistant at a university, and I have autism. And so sometimes when I'm teaching, she teaches math. Sometimes when I'm teaching, I lose my words. I can't speak. And when that happens, I have a device that I use that I type messages into. I also keep Post-it notes with me. So I'll write a note to my student, and I'll go and come lay it down on their desk for them. So that's somebody that is really in a very high level position, and sometimes she loses her speech. She's not lazy all of a sudden in the middle of her lecture. She just loses her speech. So she needs alternative means to communicate. Okay. So I think just to bring this back around, when we think about why is my child not talking, basically there's two reasons. It can be that there's a motor impairment in strength, coordination, or tone, or a physical issue. So that's a person who has trouble with their speech, just their speech. Intellectually, they understand everything you say. They know what they want to say. They just physically can't say it, okay? The other reason that a person may not be talking is that they have a language impairment. So they may not, and that's more of an in and out thing. They may not understand the words that you're saying. They may not have learned that language, and they may struggle with then producing that language to get it out. So it's not that their mouths don't work the way that they need to work, but they don't have the ability, they don't have that language in their mind. They don't know those vocabulary words, right? They can't put those together yet. All right, so either of these, and you can have a combination of these things. You can have a person who has a language challenge and has a speech challenge. So it can all kind of come together, right? I wanted to talk to you a little bit about what Bartow County looks like in terms of our augmentative communication. Hello, I have a little friend who's visiting me. Hi. He's so cute, right? Come on and get him, he's fine. It's like, I'm gonna come up here and talk with you, lady. Okay, in Bartow County, we started the Classroom Communication Project. So I wanted to give you an idea of what that looks like in your district. When I first came to Bartow County, like almost all of my districts, I was first called in to help students get communication devices funded. So I helped the district committed to helping families go through the process to fund their own personal devices. So you could own your own system, right? Because in my mind, I don't really want my school owning my child's voice. If I could avoid that, I'd really rather own it myself. So the district decided, okay, we're gonna help families own their own equipment. So access their Medicaid or their insurance or whatever that they had, and we could possibly help them get their devices. And so that's over here. That's these are dynamic displays, so devices that the screens change, high-tech individual communication systems. And so that's why I came out here, and I did in my other districts as well. But what happens is, when we do the evaluation and we get this device and we put it in the child's hand and then we walk away, they don't work. They just don't work. Because what has to happen is the child has to learn how it works. They have to understand how the system works and how people use the system to communicate. They have to be able to watch other people do it, right? And so handing them a piece of equipment is never, ever, ever going to work unless they're a student who has their cognitive skills are completely intact and they know what they want to say, then they still have to learn how to manipulate the device. If, like, for example, if one of us all of a sudden could not speak today, then we could pick up a device, we would still have to learn, right? it may ultimately work for us, but most of our students need more than that. They're learning language and communication and the device all at the same time. So we realize in our district, this is not enough. We have to do more than that in our district. So what we did is we developed this whole plan, and this is a plan that's in place in all of my school districts right now at different levels. But Bartow is one of the districts that I've been working in, one of the initial districts that we started this program in. So what we decided is we don't want to just work on communication devices. We want to make sure that every student in our district has the ability to communicate 5 specific communication objectives. We want them to be able to meet their wants and needs, and to socialize, to access the academic environment, to share their opinion. We want everyone to be able to communicate, whether they do that verbally or with a device or with a board or with sign language. However they communicate, we want to make sure that they can meet these needs in our classrooms. So this is where we started for every student. And then we said, well, we need to make sure that we are promoting communication and literacy development in the classroom. So we started this concept of the core word classroom. And what that is that we go into the classroom and we make sure that they have access to those little words that make up most of what we say. You may hear the term core vocabulary. If you look at the boards over here, those are core words. The devices all have core words on them. What core words are, in our language when we talk, there's about 200 to 400 words that we use. 80% of what comes out of our mouth is these 200 to 400 words. Now there's 10,000 words or more that I don't know the actual number, of words that we have in our language. But the ones that we use the most are these 200 to 400. So we said in our classroom, we want to make sure we're teaching those words because those are super powerful, right? So that's our classroom, core word classroom project. I'll show you some more things about that. We also said we needed to make sure that they had access to a lot of other words. So we want to make sure that they know all their clothing words and their colors, and we want them to be able to say food items and all the students' names. And if they're at the upper grade levels, they need to be able to talk about ecosystems and habitats and presidential elections and stuff, right? So we want to make sure that we expand their vocabulary in the classroom. So we're really setting up the classrooms to be communication systems. So when you go in your classroom, you should see picture symbols on the walls. You should see boards in the kids' hands. If you don't, tell your teacher, hey, I saw these things that were really cool. Maybe go call the AT team, because we'll come out and help out with that. You've got a great group of people who will help with that. So the teacher may not be using it yet, then we can move forward with that with them. If we have a student in this classroom that has symbols everywhere and everybody's talking with augmentative communication, and it's still not enough for that individual, then we're going to look at individualized communication supports. So we're going to make sure that that student has a way to communicate, whether it's a book or a board or an eye gaze frame, something that matches their need, right? So if we have kiddos who can't use their hands to touch, maybe we have to look at giving them some eye gaze things so they can look at a symbol to say something, right? Okay, so finally, and then we get back around to, if that's not enough, then we go right here and we start looking at those high-tech systems. Okay, so we kind of hit the whole gamut, the individual student and the classroom. Okay, so these are the 5 goals that we're targeting, and these are based on psychological and educational research. We know that we want all of our students to be able to meet their wants and needs. So they need to be able to tell us if they want a piece of candy. They need to be able to tell us if they need to use the restroom. They need to be able to tell us if they need a break, right? So instead of throwing themselves onto the ground, they can say, I need a break, right? That's important. We want to make sure that they can socialize. They can say hi to people. How are you? Greet, interact with their peers in the classroom. We want to make sure that they can participate in academics because this is school after all, right? We have to make sure that they have supports they need so that they can access the curriculum. We want them to be able to express their opinion. Now, I know you parents may not always want to hear your kid express their opinion, but I will tell you that being able to express your opinion with a symbol or a device or an app is much better than the alternative, which is behaviors, right? So it's much better to have a child say, I'm mad at you, you stink, I don't like it, right? Much better to have them say that than to hit you or throw themselves on the ground or destroy the television set, right? People will communicate. They're going to communicate. We just want to make them communicate in a way that's socially acceptable, right? And gets their needs met and doesn't stress them out. It stresses them out just as much as it stresses us out when they're having these behaviors, right? So we want to help them with that. And finally, we want to make sure that our kids have the ability to develop their language skills, all right? It's not enough. If you have 10 words and you're 12 years old, you need to be developing more language, right? We want you to be able to grow in that skill. Okay, our classrooms have access to we call this a communication passport. What this is it's those 5 goals, and we look at our individual students and say, what does PJ need to be able to do for wants and needs? What does Brianna need to be able to greet somebody? What does this individual student need to be able to do to meet these goals, right? The teachers, this cohort where they meet after school hours, they come and meet with us and talk about communication and how they're going to support. They've learned to use these systems, these different forms and tools in their classroom. That's what the trainings have been about. So let's take a look at what it looks like in our classrooms. We call classrooms that are set up for communication, we talk about that as being the engineering the classroom. So we're engineering the classroom for talking, right? So what that looks like is we have our students who need communication devices, like up in here, have communication devices. Their device is on, in front of them, and available for communication as much as possible, right? This young lady is in our district, and she uses an eye gaze device. So when she looks at those pictures, it speaks a message for her. We have workstations. This is in one of our model classrooms, Jessica Gardner's room. Every single student has their own workstation, and at their workstation, they have a communication flip book that has all of their words in it. They have individual symbols to reflect the things that they're working on, their tasks. They have work schedules that tell them what they're supposed to be doing, right? Some of our kids have a I need a break button right there, because when you're working, sometimes you need a break, and we don't want the break to be swiping all this off the table, right? We want them to be able to say it. Some of our classrooms have the communication programs, the apps, on their big smart board. That's really cool. So you've got a communication device that's this big. That's amazing. Some of our classrooms have that, and you're going to see more and more classrooms have that available to them. Most of our classrooms have smart boards in them, right? So you're going to see more and more of that available. This is another teacher over at Taylorsville Elementary School, and she's using our core boards, like these boards over here. She's using these in her classroom, and she's teaching the students how to use those. For her students, one of the things that they're working on is not just communication, but those core words, those are also sight words for reading. So as they get better at using these for communication, they also improve their literacy skills. That's a really important thing. Other things that you'll see in the classrooms, these two pictures I love. That's the door to the classroom. I like to think about the door as the portal into the classroom and out into the world, out into the community. So I love that these doors have communication set up so that before the child leaves the room, they can talk about where they're going to go, what are the expectations. This is in Jessica Gardner's classroom again at Taylorsville, and on her door she's got little social stories about how you behave in the cafeteria, and what do we do in the media center, and how do we behave in the hallway. And there's symbols and sentences that help kids know what to do when they leave the classroom. She's got some little symbols on the door to help the students know where they're going to go. Sometimes if you say to them, we're going to go to the cafeteria, they hear that Charlie Brown teacher voice, wah, 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 right? Okay, that doesn't tell them anything. So we wonder why our students have behaviors. Well, when they hear you go wah, 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 and they don't know what's happening, and then you grab their little hand and you start walking with them, our kids can get stressed out by that. Where are we going? What are we doing? What's going to be demanded of me? And it can cause behaviors. So she gives them information. This is another classroom. This one is down in Waycross. They've got their communication board up here, all the places that they go. And so before they leave, they pull the symbol off for go, and they pick the place that they're going to go, and all the kids get to see that. If they make a bolt for the door to leave, They have the no stop button that reminds them that they're not supposed to run out the door, right? Giving them information, okay? This is a schedule system that is over in Jessica's classroom. I think this is probably one of your doing, Karen. It's a schedule of activities for the day for the kids, and so they flip the flaps over to say when they've accomplished something, they get to check it off. Okay, so that tells them what's getting ready to happen in the day. Schedules. Most of you've probably seen schedules in your classroom. The reason that we do scheduling with picture symbol schedules is it helps kids anticipate what's going to happen during the day. Anybody in here use a calendar or schedule yourself? Yep, me too. If I did not have it, I could not tell you what was going to happen this afternoon. Like, I know I have an appointment, but I got to remember where it is so it's on my calendar. If I didn't have that, I would be very stressed out. I'm not really sure what's happening tomorrow. I haven't looked at that yet, but it's on my calendar, so I don't have to worry about it. I don't have to use my brain power to remember that. I can go look at the calendar. Our children are just like that. They need to have those supports so that they can not worry and stress about what's getting ready to happen, but they can concentrate on what we're doing right now. So that's why we have those schedule systems. Okay, this is actually Jessica's classroom, and I fudged out the little pictures because I don't have permission yet. We're in the process of getting parent permission on the students. So, but I wanted you to see what it looks like when a teacher teaches using communication as part of her activity. Okay.
Okay, Jack, what did she say? What's it say? Stop, said the cop. Stop. Police. Yes, stop, said the police. Good job. What is it?
So you see how she uses her book. This is a communication book. She has her story up on the board. She points out the symbols. And in this particular classroom, every single student has their own personal means of communication, whether it's a book or an iPad with a program on it or a device. Every student. So it's a pretty exciting classroom to be in.
Okay, Jack.
Oh, go on. Okay. All right. So here's another thing that you'll see in your classrooms. You'll see all of our classrooms, we've tried to put big interactive core boards. That's these right here, something like this. And you may see some of these in the classrooms. That's so that the teacher, when she's instructing, can point to the words as she's talking and model for the students. We have individual boards. We want all of our teachers to have their own boards that they keep with them, so that they can talk to the students. So when we're talking, when words are coming out of our mouth, we're also talking with symbols so that kids can get immersed in an environment that speaks their language. And then some of our students have individual systems. So this is the AAC flip book where you can make sentences. I like it. Where are you going? You can make sentences with this. This is the little fringe, they call it fringe vocabulary. Those are the words that are not core, but those specific words. Like Starbucks is a fringe vocabulary, okay? Pizza is a fringe vocabulary. Jacket is fringe vocabulary, right? Those words are going to be in these little strips. And then we have devices. So there's multiple devices out of the districts that people have. There's iPads and apps that people are using for communication. Okay, and then for you, I gave you guys all today these little informational brochures. These are written for you. They're written for parents. They are ways to think about how augmentative communication works. So, when you're sitting around tonight and you have nothing to do, completely bored because your kids went to bed right on time, and you have no housework to do because your house is perfect, you can read these brochures and get some ideas about how to help support your child's communication. So they're all over there. If you didn't get one, grab one of those. And then what we're going to do is we're going to shift gears a little bit. So those are the supports that are in the classroom. Any questions about that at all, or thoughts about that? If you think about something, just interrupt me and we'll talk, okay? All right, now the next thing that we want to talk about, we're going to spend the last few minutes today talking about how we help kids communicate. Because it's not just about this piece of equipment. I think really and truly, like I said before, people think that if you give a person a device, they will miraculously talk. When you give them a book, they will be able to communicate. That's a common myth that we have. You know, people get very caught up in, I must get the device. And that's because they really believe that if they hand that device over, the child's going to be able to talk, right? They're going to be able to communicate. And that's just not true. It's really, really, really not true. Right? There's a lot of things that we have to do to help our students learn to communicate. And so that's what we're going to talk about in this section, okay? So SMORES is this acronym that means, that gives us ideas about how to help people, how to support our children in learning to communicate. It's kind of silly, but it sounds yummy, so I like it, right? Who doesn't like chocolate and graham crackers and marshmallows? All right, so in our classrooms, we're thinking about how do we introduce visual language to our students, right? So we said we're going to make sure that we have a communication-focused classroom. That's the first step to it. That was everything we just talked about. The second thing is we're going to use this technique, which is extremely simplistic. I didn't have to go to school for 6 years to learn how to do this. It's just modeling, all right? All modeling is, it means that the adults around that student talk to the student in the way that we want them to talk to us. So if we want them to learn to use sign language, we have to use sign language. If we want them to learn French, we have to speak French. So anybody in here learn a foreign language when you were in school? Anybody take classes? Okay. Anybody speak a foreign language? I know Daisy does. But Daisy, your first language is Spanish, right? Okay, so Daisy had to learn English when she came to this country, right? When we learn a language, the way that we learn it is we are immersed in it. We have to exist in a place that speaks that language so that you have time to listen and watch somebody else communicate this way, and you start to learn those words. I told Daisy this morning when I met her, I guess it's been a year ago, something like that? Over a year. Yeah, a little over a year. And we met because her son got a communication device, and we were talking about this concept. And she told me, you know, and correct me if I say this wrong, but she told me, she goes, I totally understand that. Because when I came here, at 13, I think you said, at 13 years old, I didn't speak English. And I didn't talk so much to people, right? How long did you tell me?
Yes, I went like a year without talking. And I knew words, but like in my mind, I told myself, I'm not going to speak a word until I say it perfectly.
You were afraid.
So it took me a year.
It took a whole year for her to begin to speak to people in that language. Those of you who have taken a foreign language, I've taken a lot of Spanish. I took Spanish for 3 years in high school, and then I took another few semesters in college. My Spanish, people, is bad. I mean, I really don't know Spanish very well. I can do a few things, like I can start off, I can say, hola, ¿cómo está? Muy bien. But when I do that to someone who speaks Spanish and then they start talking back to me, it's all over at that point. Then I can't, and I don't even know how to say I speak a little Spanish. I know it's like poquito or something, habla, I don't know how to do it, right? I consequently do not try to speak Spanish very often because I'm not good at it and I'm afraid I'm going to make a mistake. Well, learning to use augmentative communication, learning these books and boards is the same thing. So when we wonder why our students don't try it, why our children don't touch those buttons, they're afraid they're going to make a mistake. They don't want to do it imperfectly. They're afraid they're going to do it wrong. So they don't. They're not being stubborn. They just don't. They're afraid to do it. They're afraid they're going to make a mistake. And then the other thing is they haven't had the chance to hear other people talking. For Daisy, she learned English because she lived here and everybody around her was speaking English. So she got to watch and listen for a whole year before she started using Spanish. When babies learn to talk, babies listen from the time they're born until they're 10 months to 18 months old. So they listen to people talking all that time. And they get to see how those words that come out of their mouths relate to things around them. When mom says, daddy's home, when I hear daddy, that means that man that I love so much, that's so much fun, is going to pick me up and throw me on his shoulder, is coming in the door, right? They learn to associate that. Well, our kids with augmentative communication need the same experience. They need to see us touching and talking with these systems so that they can learn what they mean. What do these words mean, right? They need time. And it's interesting to me that babies take 10 months to 18 months of being immersed in an environment that speaks their language before they start talking. And then Daisy told us it took her about a year of the same thing. We know from our English as a second language research that just getting that basic language for our students coming into our country that don't speak English can take them 6 months to 2 years before they start to feel comfortable speaking the language. Our AAC users speaking this language are no different. They need to see it. So if you hand your child a device, you need to plan to spend a lot of time talking to them with the device before you can expect them to use it. That makes sense? It's pretty simplistic. We have to learn the system. Now we don't. Why don't we? Because it's hard. It's a new language for us too, right? We have to learn it, and we feel like we're not competent with it. Okay, so just to bring it all back together, how do we teach people to communicate spontaneously who are augmentative communication users? Well, we take a lot of symbols and we talk with the symbols. We talk with the symbols. We say, I'm going to go somewhere. I like what you did. I'm excited to see you. I love you. We're going to let them see that, right? We're going to immerse them in a world that speaks, shows, and writes the symbols that we want them to be able to use. So it's a challenge for us too, right? It's work. It's work. But it's worth it because we give our kids the ability to communicate. Okay, I wanted to show you this, not that I expect anyone is going to go without the research and read it. I don't even do that much. I mean, I do some. But there is a lot of research on why we use modeling to teach augmentative communication. So these are some of the articles that are out there. I put them up there so that you know that they exist. If you feel the need to read these articles, let me know and I will be glad to send them to you. I don't really like to read research that much, so let me just give you the short answer to the research is that modeling works and it's the most effective method that we have to teach people to communicate. Okay, so you almost have to trust that process because remember we said it can take a year of listening to somebody talk with the system before a child learns to talk with it. Now some of our students, the first time I put it in front of them, they get it. Okay, so it can be much faster than that, but for functional communication, it can take a lot longer, and you have to be patient with that process. Keep talking, keep touching those buttons on the board, keep touching the devices, keep inputting that information to them. What we know is that most of the time when we give a child a communication device, most of the time that is addressed in speech therapy. So the speech therapist is talking with the device and teaching the device. If you're really fortunate, your child has 1 hour a week of speech therapy. Does anybody have more than that? That's about the average that you get. If you get speech therapy, maybe you get an hour a week, maybe, right? If you go to private clinics, even private clinics, you're not going to get more than an hour a week of speech. So if we are only using our speech device or a board or a book in speech therapy, for a child to get enough modeling, so we need to put them in a situation that speaks their language, right? For them to get as much opportunity to listen to people talking with their system and learning as that little, remember that toddler in 1.5 years who starts talking? The amount of input that he has, the amount of time that this child gets to hear speech before he talks at 1.5 years, it will take our AAC users 84 years to get the same amount of input if the only place that people are talking to them with their devices is in speech therapy. So what does that mean for us? Can we just take them to speech therapy and expect it to work? It will not work. I want to tell you that it will not. It has to be done at home. The family has to be using the system. It has to be done at school. They're at school 30 hours a week. That's a good chunk of time. So at school, we're going to really try hard with this, right? They're with you the rest of the time. So we need to be using our system. If we really want it to work, if we commit to making it work, we have to use it at home too, right? We're going to do our part at school. You guys do your part at home. The speech therapist does their part in the clinic, right? And we can make this work. We can do this together as a team. Okay. This is an example. Oh well. Oops. Hold on. I want to show you what modeling looks like. This is Kendall and I. You saw Kendall's picture earlier. Kendall struggles with his comprehension of spoken language. It's challenging for him. But he and I worked together for many, many years. We have a very strong relationship. And he trusts me enough to listen to me. He used to have lots of behaviors, but he trusts me enough to listen to me. So I use the device so that he can understand what I'm saying. So I'm not sure he understands just my speech. So I talk with him touching the device, and then he responds with his device. And it's kind of like a little translator tool for us, right? And so this is a little video of he and I interacting. Oh, nope. It was a video, and then it went away. Try that again. Okay.
All right. Thank you. You told me it was okay if I turn on my camera on my iPad. So on my iPad, I turned on my camera.
I turn on camera, iPad.
Okay? Is that okay with you?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. Kendall, you told me, you said you were tired today, huh?
I'm tired.
I wonder why. I have a question. Why are you feeling tired?
I'm tired.
Why are you tired?
Yes.
Yeah, I wonder why you're tired. Let me see. Are you tired because you had too much driving? Was there too much driving today?
Trying.
You drove a lot. So much. You had a big drive to get over here, huh? That was a long drive, right? That's so funny. It took a lot of time.
Are you happy to be here, right?
Look at here. It took a lot of time to get here, huh? You had to wake up early this morning, huh? Yeah, it took a lot of time. Yeah, you had to get up early in the morning this morning. Yep. Yeah. So you had to wake up and get out of bed. Yeah. You had no more sleeping, huh? No, that's not good. Don't get to sleep. Don't. You're funny. Don't sleep. Poor Kendall. No sleeping this morning. Look, let's see. Morning, don't sleep. Poor Kendall.
I love that kid so much. Kendall's probably 23 now, something like that. I met him when he was 10 years old. He has a diagnosis of autism and intellectual challenges, and he's not speaking. Also, he has challenges with the motor movement of speech. So he was struggling with understanding language, producing language, and actually physically speaking. So communication was really, really hard for him. And when I met him at 10 years old, he is a strong personality. So he had behaviors when I met him because he wanted to communicate. He wasn't a bad kid. He wanted to communicate. He didn't have a way to communicate, and he was struggling understanding what we were saying to him, right? So he and I had some situations. You know, I got a few scars on my body because of Kendall. You know, but that's okay. We love each other very much. And we got to the point where we could communicate well with each other. And at this time, you can see as he's communicating here, I'm supporting him, right? He's not doing that completely independently. I'm helping him get to the pages that he needs to. I'm giving him some suggestions of things that he might could say. I'm supporting his communication. But But would you say that was an effective interaction? I thought it was very effective. Later that day, he was able to tell me we had a little bit of a concern about, he was in a group home for a period of time, and we had a little bit of concern that his, that the person that was running the home, the group home, was being not so great to him. We were concerned about what was happening in the home, and he was having some more behaviors. And she did not know that he could communicate. At the time that we did this video, she did not think he could communicate at all. Okay, and he couldn't with her because she didn't know enough to help him, support him with the system, right? Well, we were concerned that there was over-medication going on. We were concerned about behavioral restraints going on. We weren't sure exactly what was happening. And he was having trouble self-reporting, right? So later in the session, he told me that she was bad, and we talked about it. And it was interesting because he actually started laughing. So because I said, you're telling on her, huh? And he laughed. Like he thought he was satisfied that he got to tell. It doesn't appear that anything terrible was happening. It appears that she was just kind of grumpy. That's what it got down to. And so she was a little bit mean. It could have gone a whole different direction, but it didn't. It wasn't that level. But she just wasn't really nice, is what the issue was. And for him, he was laughing. By the end of the session, talking about this lady, he told me who she was, told me she was grumpy. I mean, he told me all about her and thought it was hysterical that he got to tell. And I told his mom when he left, I said, you be sure that you let her know that he was able to tell me all this stuff. Because she needs to know he can communicate. Because what's going to happen if she knows he can communicate? She's not going to do it anymore. That's right. Our kids get targeted because they have struggles communicating, and people think they can't tell. So I told his mom, you go tell her he understands everything you say and he can communicate whatever he wants to. Let her know. Because even if he can't, she needs to believe it. Right? So anyway. Okay, so but you see what I was doing with modeling for him? I'm just talking to him with the device. The reason that was successful, I know the device, right? I know how to get around on the device. If I didn't know the device, I couldn't do that, right? So it's imperative that we know the device. If we adults do not know the device or the book or the board that we're using, we don't know where the words are, and we don't know how to use it, our kids don't stand a chance of learning it, right? We have to know it. So you've got to take that time. A little trick that works is take your child's device or take the book and don't speak and talk to your significant other or talk to the other kids in your home or talk to your friend and just use the device or the book. Do it for like 15 minutes, I dare you. It is hysterical. It really is enlightening. It will teach you where things are on the device. You'll learn it pretty quick because you'll need it to communicate. It also gives you a really healthy respect for how challenging it can be to do that. So that's homework for you all. I would suggest you try that. It's tricky. Okay. This is a classroom. I wanted to show you what it looks like in a classroom. It's a lot different to model me and my friends sitting there one-to-one, right? That's one thing. But when you're in front of 25 kids and you're modeling, that's a whole different thing. So this is a preschool classroom, and it is an inclusion classroom. So there are about 6 students in here who have been identified as having special needs of some sort. A lot of them struggle with communication. And then there's another like 15 preschoolers who are just in general education. So there's a mix of these students in this classroom. There's a lot going on in this room, all right? And so she is using a program called Tell Me, which is they read storybooks, and then they target specific words and modeling in order to teach communication to the students. So I want you to see how all the students react to this.
All right, we're learning some words that are going to be in our book that we've got to look for today. Listen, shh, Daniel, you got to help me read, okay? Let's talk about what these words are before we look at our book. We looked at our words. We looked at our pictures yesterday. And that's right. Oh, awesome, Jamie. Good morning. All right, let's do it together. Here we go. our book. Okay?
He's one of my favorite authors.
Oh, what did we say this first picture is? Penguin. Penguin. It says, I am a penguin, and I, just a minute, Jay, we'll do it in a minute, okay? It says, I am a penguin, and I turn my head. Can you do that? And you do it. Turn your head. Just your head, keep the rest of your body still. Listen, I can do it. I can do it. Show me how you do it. Just like a penguin.
A little different in the classroom, isn't it? That's a typical classroom. Classrooms are noisy, busy places, right? What are the things that you saw that were different between this modeling and the modeling with myself and Kendall? What did you see different?
The group of children instead of individual.
Yeah, there was a larger group of people instead of the individual. How about what we used to model? So Kendall was using a Bccca device, and she was using picture symbols. But they were both modeling, right? It looks different. So sometimes when you're in a situation in the classroom, you may see picture symbols being used off of the device, and that's okay. There's a reason that we do that is in this environment, in this particular situation, that is a challenge. The kids are challenged to sit there and listen and learn those words. So in that situation, the cognitive academic demand is pretty high. So at that time, we want the communication demand to be pretty low. We don't want to have hard communication we're learning and hard academic content at the same time. Because when you're in preschool learning sight words, I can do it, that's hard academics, right? Now, but when we are at snack time, which is low cognitive demand, everybody knows how to eat their snack, right? Then we can bump up the demand for communication, so maybe we'll have our devices at that point. So think about that. When you come into the classroom, you may not always see a device out, but there's a reason for that. Hopefully the reason is that that's purposeful, right? And not that the teacher is not comfortable with the device, right? Because if that's the situation, then you need to call us or tell the teacher to call us and we'll help her. We'll help her get comfortable with it, right? Okay. Okay, I was going to show you one more lesson that has modeling in it. Let's see if this will work for us. This is a little bit higher grade level, and this is in a different district, but I want you to see it because this is where we're heading. The only reason I don't have a lot of video in Bartow is we're waiting on parent permission, so I'm not showing a lot of video for Bartow yet, but I will be because there's some really great things happening here. This is down in Waycross in Ware County. I have permission on all the kids and the teachers, so I can show their video. He is teaching. Every student in here has communication challenges of some sort. Some speak, some don't speak. Some use devices, some don't use devices. Some use books, right? Some use boards. And when they do those, you'll see people modeling and talking with these words. They do a heavy emphasis on core vocabulary.
Why did the igloo melt, Jess? What's an igloo made out of? It's made out of, can you find ice cubes on your paper? Ice cube. Ice cube.
Where is
Can you find ice?
Look down here.
Yeah.
There it is.
See ice?
Where's the ice cube on your paper?
Ice.
There it is.
And the sun is what's Trinity? Hot or cold?
Hi.
It's hot. So the sun melted the ice. So the sun came out and melted Little High's igloo. Now, who will help me fill my box? She asked. Because the inchworms and iguana ran away and the sun melted the igloo, she has an empty box.
Oh no.
Empty box.
Who's gonna help?
Not in the box. A friend came by. I will help you, he said. We can fill your box with insects.
Oh, is that hell?
Insects. Can you find your insects?
Yeah, Jessie. Sure.
Yes, you did good.
It's all in there. Picture bags.
Good job.
Speech pathologists up in the corner boards right there, and she talks with it while the teacher's instructing. And when she's not in the room, the paraprofessional holds that board and models. So as the teacher's talking, the paraprofessional is touching the words. There's only 36 words up there, but they can say a lot with it. Those are core words. They can say a lot with those 36 words. So they have support. We have the teacher teaches, the parapros model, or the speech pathologist models. Different things that you saw in this room is we didn't just use our core boards, but we had little boards that were set up to match the book so that the kids could interact, right? Other things that we saw in that classroom, how about the engagement of the students? They were pretty engaged, weren't they? I videoed them the day before without these supports. They were all looking around. A couple of them got up and ran away, right? So by having these supports, they were able to interact in the classroom. So even though there's no high-tech system here, because his device is broken, hers is in funding, okay, so the devices are great, but they will break, and we need to have other supports. You can do supports with light tech, right?
Why did?
Okay. These are the techniques that we use when we are helping when we're modeling for our students. We want to slow down what we're saying a little bit so they have time to process that. We model by touching the words. Respect and reflect, and I gave you a little handout that has this information on it. Respect and reflect just means it's sort of like being the child whisperer. We watch their bodies, and whatever they're trying to say with their bodies, we show them the word that they can use to say that. So if they fling themselves on the floor, we go, oh, you want to stop. I see. Okay. We give them words, right? We respect that they're communicating. So the first time they fling themselves to the floor, we are not calling the behavior specialist. We're acknowledging they're communicating, and we're reflecting that by giving them a symbol, or we're touching it on their device or something that allows them to say what they want to say. When you can say what you want to say, it decreases your emotion drastically. When you're angry, if you can just say, I am really mad, that decreases that sensation in your body. That's just a natural psychological thing that we do, our brains do. And our kids do the same thing. Just being able to express it will decrease the behavior. So that's a really big tool that we have in our toolbox. When we're modeling, we repeat after our kids. So if I use the word go, the symbol for go, and I say, we're gonna go, I'm gonna say that multiple times. We're gonna go, let's go. Who's ready to go? Here we go. I'm gonna repeat it so they get to see it many, many, many times. I'm gonna expand on what they're saying. So if they push one button, they say eat, I can say, oh, you wanna eat. I wanna eat too. I like to eat. I'm gonna add another word to what they say. And finally, and this is probably one of the most important ones, when we ask a child a question, we have to stop and give them time to answer us. So it's bad. We have a habit of filling quiet space with words. So we talk and talk and talk and talk and talk. We have to stop and wait and give them time to process and think about what they want to say. If you have trouble with that, and you will, because everybody does, you can count in your head till 10. That's what I do. When I ask a question, then I go, okay, that's a 1, that's a 2. I make myself wait 10 seconds before I then ask anything else or say anything else to my child. That will help you a lot. Okay. All right, this is something that I just wanted to share with you, and then we're going to finish up and give you some time to walk around and get some information and talk to our consultants. And you can also come up here and talk to me as well about what we're doing in our school districts and some of the light tech supports. They've got the high tech supports, and I've got more of the lighter tech supports and some iPads. But I wanted to share this with you because this is the tenets that we live by with our students. Okay, we tell our partners, thou shalt start with motivating activities. Kids communicate when they're motivated to communicate. Thou shalt be sure I am engaged. We want to make sure that they want to interact with us. That's important. If I am not interested, thou shalt go back to number 1. If they don't want to talk about what you want to talk about, back it up and find something they want to talk about, right? Thou shalt talk using my symbols or AAC system. Okay, adults, you have to touch the boards too. That's important. Thou shalt be patient. Wait for me. Give me a chance to process information. Thou shalt not force me to communicate. We do not grab people's hands and make them touch the devices. We don't do that. It's very tempting because we can make somebody touch the device. We can make them push a button, right? We can physically make that happen. You can't make people communicate. If they're talking, you can't put your finger in their mouth and pull their little tongue out and make it go up and down and to the side and speak, right? We can't do that with our students either. If you're taking their hand and you're moving it and putting it on a symbol, that is not communication. That's physical manipulation. So don't do that, okay? If your child needs some help, letting you helping to touch a symbol, you can do something called hand underhand. So you can take their hand, you can put your hand underneath their hand and let them sort of ride on your hand, and you can touch the symbols. And that's okay because if they want to let go, they can, right? We're not making them do it. They're just riding along and they get to experience the touching and the communicating without being forced to do it, okay? So hand over hand is a bad idea. Let's not do that. Thou shalt not lay hands on me. Oops, I just said that, right? No hand over hand. Not for communication. Thou shalt not take away my communication system. You need to make sure if they've got a device, they need to have the device. If they've got a book, they need to have the book. They need to be able to communicate all the time. When you take those systems away from them, it's like slapping a piece of duct tape over their mouth. We don't do that, right, to speaking children. We're not going to do it to our ASQs. We have to give them a way to communicate. Thou shalt encourage me to comment, share, and ask questions. So communication is not just, I want candy, I want Skittles, I want play, I want jump, I want toys. That's not communication. If that's all the child learns how to do, nobody's going to want to hang out with them, right? So we want to make them be able to say things like, I like that, I don't like it, how are you, what's going on? The reasons that we really communicate. And finally, thou shalt always believe I can do it, right? You have to have that belief in your child. You have to believe that there's progress that they can make. Just because a child, even if your children have intellectual challenges or autism, that doesn't mean they can't learn. That's not what those labels mean. It means they learn differently, but it doesn't mean they can't learn. They can learn. Everyone can learn, right? So we just have to figure out what direction we're going to go and what supports we need to provide for that. Okay, I'm going to stop talking now so you have plenty of time to talk to everyone else. If you have any questions or you need any help, feel free to contact me. Your AT team is here in the district and they can help you out. But we are here to make this work. We want to do this as a team, and we deeply appreciate that you guys are here today. All right? So thanks. Let's go talk to people.